This episode is about people who experienced the supernatural. Someone on Reddit asked, "What is the most paranormal thing you've experienced?" And here are the answers. My grandmother died when I was in kindergarten, but when I was little I remembered she would put wet washcloths on my cousins' foreheads when they were teenagers and wouldn't get out of bed. We used to all get a laugh out of it. One time in college I had an exam at 7 a.m. and I am notorious for sleeping late on accident. Anyway, the morning of my exam my alarm didn't go off, but I feel a really cold wet feeling on my forehead, like a washcloth. It immediately woke me up, and I saw my grandmother standing over me, telling me I needed to get up and out of bed. I looked at my alarm, and it was 6:45. I still made it to the exam. As a kid I always had trouble sleeping. Even in kindergarten I would never nap during the day, and the teachers would separate me from the other kids during nap time, as I kept them awake. Even in the middle of the night, I would wake up, and I just couldn't go back to sleep, no matter how hard I tried. As I started to grow older, I just accepted it, so I just would end up watching TV until the rest of the house woke up. Around first or second grade, I remember I woke up one night, and my mom was just sitting on the floor beside my bed, resting her back on my nightstand. I remember asking her why she was there, and she told me that she was keeping an eye on me cause I was sick, and then told me to go back to sleep. So I went back to sleep. This went on for about a week, until one day I decided to question her about it. She said that she had no idea about what I was talking about, and that she never stood by my bed all this time. That night, I woke up again. Sure enough, my mom was there comforting me and telling me to go back to sleep. I told her that she wasn't real, but she kept insisting that she was. So I just tried to touch her, and that's when she disappeared. She started to appear less and less, and she would go away when I tried to touch her. After a while, it got to a point that when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would just swat the air near my nightstand and then go back to sleep without even opening my eyes. And then she went away and never appeared again. I think about it often, and I have no explanation for this. It definitely sounds like something that would happen to a schizophrenic, but I am a fully functioning adult with no mental health issues with a steady income and currently working on getting my master's degree. I have not gotten any sort of hallucinations ever since this incident, but I still have trouble sleeping. I never sleep during the day, as it disorients me, and when it becomes nighttime, I basically don't lay down until I am so tired that I just pass out as soon as my head touches the pillow. My husband, parents and I were camping in the Missouri Ozarks. It was fall, around 10:30 at night, and we were sitting around the campfire. A white ball of light basketball-sized appeared suddenly in the distance off to our right. It traveled extremely fast along the ground through the trees and stopped in my husband's lap. It moved across him, me, my mom and dad over about 10 seconds before it sped off to our left over the horizon and was gone. There was no sound, no airplane noise, or cars around. We were by ourselves on about 200 acres of forest. My dad walked a ways in the direction it went, but said he couldn't see anything. Years later, I'm still scratching my head over what it was. I had something similar happen and wasn't sure if it was a vivid dream. I woke up startled one night to see a bright ball of light enter the room through a closed window next to my bed and tried to get close to my head, but I waved it away, like a person frightened of a bee would, arms wildly flapping, then watched as it floated out of the room into the rest of the apartment before it disappeared. I've had people tell me it was probably ball lightning, but I've seen ball lightning in real life, and this didn't act like that. And I'm not sure how lightning traveled through a closed window pane, so I don't know what it was. I mentioned this to my aunt, who is a bit religious mixed with New Age, and she mentioned that she has had the same experience, except the light ball talked to her. Her theory is that this was a visit from a guardian angel. Okay. I'm skeptical of her story, but I still don't have an explanation of what the hell that was. When I saw ball lightning, it was only the one time at night. I was with another relative driving down an exit ramp off the highway, and we both saw this ball of light flashing as it was traveling slowly down from the utility pole to a stop sign. There was a clear straight path it traveled, like you'd expect electricity would. It did not seem to float aimlessly like the light ball that was in my apartment, nor did it pass through solid objects. Electricity tends to follow a couple rules, and this floating thing didn't act like electricity would. Can't explain it. I was once at my grandmother's for Christmas when I was about 11 or so. It was Christmas Eve, and I was sharing a room with my father, him being fast asleep and snoring on the bed opposite me. Throughout that age I had a lot of trouble getting to sleep. I was always a massive insomniac, and with my dad snoring away was basically just being kept wide awake. At some point, long after everyone in the house had fallen asleep, while I was still wide awake, I was jolted into the most intense state of fear I think I have ever experienced. From the 3-foot space behind me that separated my bed from the door, I shit you not, the most intensely gravelly and hoarse voice I've ever heard ducking announced to the room, "I'm Santa." It scraped through me, and I just ducking froze. There was no transition between the before, during, or after it spoke, as there would be from waking up, so I am still convinced that I had not somehow fallen asleep. I literally just lay there in complete terror, facing my dad as he continued to snore and refusing to turn around. I lay like that for ages, sweating buckets upon buckets into my bed sheets, and I guess eventually passed out. Woke up Christmas morning afraid and terrified, with a very clear memory of it all. My house is old and constantly has weird things happen in it. One night my ex and I were fast asleep when someone or something banged on our bedroom door. I know it's really happened because we both woke up. I quickly grabbed my gun out of my nightstand and flung the door open within like 5 seconds of this happening, and no one was there. I ran throughout the entire house with my chest pounding, fully expecting to find an intruder. All I found was my dogs asleep on the kitchen floor. They bark at everything and are very good guard dogs, meaning that they heard nothing. I still cannot explain how this happened. I had a similar experience to this recently. In a bid to quickly save money for a house, my partner and I decided to sacrifice space and take residence in the bedsit annex attached to my parents' house at a greatly reduced rent. I think we had been living there for a good year at this point, when one night I awoke at about midnight to what sounded like a fist banging loudly on the glass window of our front door. It was rapid banging too, like someone trying to get your attention for an emergency. This noise was not long after my father had had his first heart attack, so I initially assumed it was Mum banging on my door to wake and tell me something was wrong. There's no phone signal where my parents live, so a call was out of the question. I jumped up and sprinted to the door and pulled back the blinds to see nothing there. Just a dark normal garden. The other half didn't know what was going on, apparently he heard nothing. I was 4 or 5 and had a dream about this guy with a hole in his throat in my bedroom. He told me not to be scared, and I told him I wasn't. He said he just wanted to ask questions about the family, how everyone was doing, and I told him. Then I woke up. I told my grandmother about the dream, and she turned white. Got out a photo album. I saw his picture and went, "That's him." But why did he have a hole in his throat? It was my great-grandfather who died 2 years before I was born. He had had a tracheotomy due to throat cancer. Back in 1993 I worked at a radio station that was supposedly one of the most haunted buildings in New Mexico. I was very skeptical, still am, but there was some weird things that happened there I still haven't figured out. The backstory is that the building was originally a house, and the owner made a living by making gravestones. He did this in the basement. Sometime in the late 80s he died whilst carving one down there. The building was sold, converted to said radio station, but that stone stayed in the basement. For several years, according to the people who worked there back then, some really weird things happened, and eventually they took the stone out. That seemed to alleviate some of the haunted things. When I was there, some random stuff was still happening. For example, I worked the night shift and would go out into the office and shut off all the lights to lower the electric bill. I'd go out a while later, and all the lights would be back on. Freaky. Or I'd be working on something in a studio, and the CD player would open and close on its own. One time a reel-to-reel tape fell off the machine, then was powered down and rolled across the floor. Then one day our overnight guy came in and said he experienced something very strange. He was playing a song off the new Bon Jovi CD. The lights flickered off for a moment, and everything came back on. But the CD player was showing a different track than what was playing on the air. We got out the album and looked at the track listing. The song that was displayed, but not playing, was called "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead." I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with some roommates while I was stationed in Gita, Italy, Navy. There was a poltergeist that haunted all 3 floors that we named Calvin. Calvin liked to take things, only to return them later, rattle dishes, throw people off of the couch, etc. One day I came home after standing the 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. watch, and I was really tired. Calvin had been quiet for a while, but that day decided to start rattling plates in the kitchen, just as I was starting to doze off. I just ignored him and tried to go to sleep, and would have if he hadn't walked across the bed. I could feel the mattress indent as he moved. One day a friend was over at the apartment cleaning it while we were out to sea. She was washing the windows and had left the living room to get some clean water. When she came back, it looked like someone had breathed on the glass to fog it over, and the word Calvin was written on the fog. Needless to say, she didn't come back to the apartment. The night after my father died, when I was trying to sleep, I felt this heaviness in the air. It was this thick, heavy pressure that made it feel nearly impossible to breathe. It finally let up after I managed to sorta clear my throat and say, "Dad, stop it," but I still have a weird suspicion that maybe the old man didn't know he was dead and just needed confirmation. I'm not sure why, but I sometimes hear breathing. I think it's an auditory hallucination that's linked with my anxiety. It's odd, mostly before I fall asleep or in the car if I turn the music down. A voice spooked the duck out of me when I was 17. Backstory: I was in what Americans would call high school, I guess, Finland, different system, in another town. I'd come home to my parents for the summers. So, being 17 and having older friends, they were usually out at bars with my older brother, so I couldn't really join. But it was all good. My brother had a killer PC at the time, and I just loved Borderlands. So, I spent the nights playing that, accompanied only by my dog who would sleep calmly on my bed behind me. So, headset on, I was playing NG+, and was ready to go to sledge as I feel a breath in my neck and hear a very audible whisper saying, "What do you want?" I freeze, afraid to turn. I gather my courage and take the headphones off and turn sharply, ready to react to anyone who might be behind me. But all I see is my dog, shivering and trembling, looking scared AF with his tail between his legs. No bark, nothing, which was odd, since he is a Jack Russell. Still don't know what it was. But it did duck me up for a while. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and like if you want to be protected from evil supernatural beings. And remember, you never know if there is anyone or anything standing in your room at this very moment.